Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray. We're going to give everyone a moment to get logged in, get settled in. I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to the relaunch of A Seat at the Table. It's a series that my office has been hosting during the legislative session. We started it last session and are continuing it this session, given that the legislature is remote. And my goal is to give Vermonters working in our communities, either in the business sector or the nonprofit sector, community leaders, also educators, a space to be able to talk about some of the most pressing issues facing Vermont. And I'm really excited about today, one, because we're relaunching this series and we'll do it every 3 weeks. So I hope that you'll not only tune in today, but tune in throughout the session as we discuss important issues facing the state, but really because of the founding or the first topic to launch this series this session. And that's focusing on the climate action plan that our state is so proudly released. I know that a lot of folks here participated in not only drafting the Global Warming Solutions Act and then getting it passed by the legislature, but also participated in the Climate Council and then releasing a climate action plan, which is a really exciting and interesting framework for our state as we think about meeting our climate action goals. And then with that, really diving into what does it mean to build the workforce and create opportunity here in the state to meet those goals. And so I'm deeply, deeply proud to have some leaders across a lot of different spaces, education, across solar and renewables, weatherization, people working in equity and making sure that we have equity and participation, that all of our communities can really participate in developing the workforce, being the workforce, and helping us meet our goals. So that's what today's conversation is about, how these seat at the tables work. We really I like to give the floor to our experts and then really open up the table, the virtual table, to dialogue. So I just want to welcome everyone who's joining us today. I will ask that you take a moment to put your name and affiliation into the chat, just so we're creating some space and everyone is introducing themselves. Two, just a reminder that this is recorded, so will be available later. So if you know folks who are not here who should listen to this, you can share it with them. I want to recognize the Vermont Energy Action Network as well, and the Climate Workforce Coalition. There are a lot of incredible leaders across the state working in this space, trying to build the workforce. I know that many of those folks are here today. So thank you for joining us, and you can learn more about the Energy Action Network by going to enavt.org. I also know we have a lot of legislators here today. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your participation in today's conversation. So with that, I'm going to begin by introducing our very first speaker, Chad Farrell. Chad, thanks for joining us. Chad is the Chief Executive Officer of Encore Renewable Energy, a leading solar developer here in Vermont, but Chad's also participated with the Climate Council and is going to start out with briefing us all on the climate action plan, what are some of the goals, and then also the work of Encore Renewable. So welcome, Chad. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Gray, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so there's a lot of exciting work going on in what we call the climate economy these days, as we do know that mitigating the negative effects of climate change and moving towards a fully decarbonized economy essentially offers the single greatest economic development opportunity of the 21st century. We've known this for a little while, but it's really exciting to see a lot of the renewed interest in the sector as we move into the 2020s. As Lieutenant Governor mentioned, the work of the Climate Council was a significant push over the last 12 to 15 months. And there's some really exciting recommendations that come out of that report. And I would frame the report as a solid step in the right direction. We clearly have a lot of work to do, but we're recognizing the fact that we need to move to an energy economy that is powered 100% by renewable energy, both within the state of Vermont and beyond. and that we need to be looking at everything with a lens of equity, right? Our energy system over the past number of decades has become increasingly inequitable, where folks in the lower and middle income ranges are bearing the brunts of our energy needs, and that really needs to change moving forward. So it's really exciting and powerful to see that focus on equity and inclusion, and really making sure that everybody benefits from this transition that we're going to make. So it's estimated that over 25 million new jobs will be created nationally as we transition from an economy powered by fossil fuels to one that's powered by clean, more efficient electrical generation for our energy needs. And, this is where it's interesting for the state of Vermont, given our early leadership in the clean energy economy. Our state stands to benefit from this transition, to perhaps a greater degree than many other states in the region and nationally as well. So, but, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, to best capitalize on this energy transition, Vermont really needs to rapidly expand our educational, vocational, and transitional training capacities to ensure that the state is most well equipped to realize the economic development, the job creation potential associated with this energy transition, while we go about combating the worst effect of climate change for our state. So we're going to need, and I should mention, just to put that 25 million jobs into perspective, the current active US economy is around 162 million jobs. So you're talking about an addition. These are net new jobs, an addition of more than 15% of our labor force nationally. That is incredibly significant. And we are now in a position where we're able to make the argument around decarbonization and moving towards cleaner forms of electrical generation based on an economic argument. I can remember 10 years ago when we first did our first batch of solar projects, we needed to find mission-driven investors. We needed to find, one or two grants. We needed to find zero interest debt, and we needed a wing and a prayer to get a project done. Well, fast forward a decade, and solar and increasingly energy storage and wind as well are now cost competitive with most all other forms of electrical generation or energy generation. So that's really exciting. We're now making the argument based on economics, not the equally important environmental and social benefits. So that's really huge. But yeah, the job creation opportunities here are significant. We need electricians. We need installation contractors. There's going to be a whole new economy based around carbon accounting. So we're going to need carbon accounting specialists to basically measure our progress towards these decarbonization goals, towards our carbon sequestration goals. And so there's going to just, from the ends of the spectrum of jobs, they're all there. Traditional construction work is going to be in high demand as well as we look to harden our infrastructure against the negative effects of climate change. And this could be replacing culverts. This could be widening of roadways. This is going to be, locating infrastructure in more compact areas. And it's going to be recognizing some of the flood vulnerability that is especially acute here in our state of Vermont. Critical to all of this is broadband. So we're going to need experts in, broadband and IT to make all this work. It's all going to be sort of orchestrated and choreographed using technology, right? We'll be able to generate, store, and move energy around based on the technology. So broadband is absolutely critical. So we're essentially going to electrify everything. I think you're going to hear that expression more and more as we move through this decade. Some people have talked about a wartime mobilization effort to address this challenge, similar to World War II when gross domestic product more than tripled as a result of the investments that were made then. That's what we're talking about now. So, and excitingly, we don't have to make this transition from a perspective of austerity. And I think that's another aspect of this transition that's really exciting. We're not going to be forcing everybody to drive tiny EVs. You know, people will be able to drive Ford F-150s, electric version of those, and they'll be able to power your house as well as, you know, get you to work and back. And I think that's going to be a game changer, especially for rural states like Vermont. So, you know, I think our way of life, our traditional way of life continues. We just need to be generating our energy from sources that are a lot more efficient than what we've done in the past with fossil fuels. And we essentially, we absolutely need to transition those folks over to being adept with cleaner energy generation technologies. And we know that there is interest in, you know, in our fossil fuel industry to begin making this transition. And they were part of the climate action plan. And I think there's recognition that there's jobs here for everybody. We just need to transition everybody over and do so in an equitable and sustainable fashion. So maybe I'll pause there and look forward to hearing the remarks from the other speakers, and be happy to answer any questions towards the end of the meeting here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. And thanks for highlighting not only the 25 million jobs nationally, but I'm sure there's a part of that Vermont will have, right? There are a number of jobs here that can be created, and the fact that they are existing in a lot of different sectors, right? From carbon to broadband to electricians, carpenters, you name it. We have a lot of different job opportunities. I just wanted to remind folks, if you're joining us, put your name and affiliation in the chat. We look forward to bringing you into the conversation. But I do want to now turn it over and shift to a lot of 3 different groups in particular who are working to actually train the next generation or future leaders in the state who are helping to deploy weatherization, helping to really meet our goals through a lot of different programming. So we're going to begin with Thomas Longstreth from Resource Vermont, who serves as the executive director. Thomas, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us what you do, tell us where you work, tell us how you are helping to grow a workforce ready to meet these really bold climate action goals that we have here in Vermont.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Gray. I appreciate being invited to this. Resource has been around for the last 30 years. We're a nonprofit organization that has a 3-part mission of job training, poverty relief, and environmental stewardship. And you know, the way we try to make it all work is where we can combine each of those elements into a single whole. So, you know, we actually, one of our first job training programs was appliance repair. So we would take in older appliances, we would refurbish and repair them, and then we'd make them available to low-income people. And we'd give away a lot of them to relieve poverty or deal with disasters. Over the years, we've grown and developed. We now have 4 sites in Burlington, Williston, Hyde Park, and Barrie. But our training programs are really serving the entire state with a variety of programs that are either workforce experience, sort of a first step in the process of getting trained, or workforce development. And the COVID pandemic has really accelerated a 20-year trend towards lower labor force participation. The unemployment rate has bounced back to pre-pandemic levels, but the workforce is still down by 30,000 workers. And while the employment to population ratio is down by 10%. You know, I think these statistics, I think, are important when we think of what was just that Chad just explained. With this huge growth in renewables, in climate mitigation, there's going to be a significant growth needed in jobs. And so when you pair that up with what's happening with COVID, with an aging workforce that people have been discussing and sort of contemplating, worrying about for the last 15, 20 years, there's a real problem. And on one hand, it's a problem, but on the other hand, it's a tremendous opportunity to get people who've been or who are not in the workforce back into the workforce. So, the stress of this tight labor market is contributing to high inflation. It's making it harder to get important work done, including construction of housing, construction of renewable energy, weatherization work. But it's also creating an opportunity that is allowing low-income and disadvantaged individuals to gain skills and become gainfully employed. And then employers are suddenly much more receptive to hiring those with imperfect resumes, some sort of corrections involvement, some prior history of alcohol or drug abuse, or physical disabilities. And this is where I think coordinated action to train these sidelined workers to transform our energy infrastructure can help reverse these negative employment trends and create new opportunities for these low-income people. Resource has run a youth build program for the past 16 years. Youth build is a program that serves high school dropouts who are trying to gain skills and move into good jobs. A couple of years ago, we started our Construction 101 intensive, and we've had great success placing disadvantaged workers into gainful employment after just 6 weeks of intensive training. The disadvantage of the youth build program is it's a year-long program, gets kids their high school degree. It's a really comprehensive wraparound, but it's also, we're only graduating 20, 25 students a year. The construction intensives have really allowed us to ramp up the services and get more individuals placed into good jobs. So we've been building on the success and strong outcomes we developed for this Construction 101 and have now developed a weatherization intensive built on that same general model of a 6-week training that gives trainees construction skills, an OSHA safety certification, and the chance to do important service that supports the community. Trainees are then placed with an employer for 2 weeks of additional training, and the placement generally results in gainful employment as the employers really view it as a extended job interview. So some of the recent outcomes, we've got 98% job placement rate for the Construction 101 and Weatherization 101. We've got 100% of trainees earning a certification that's recognized by employers. We've got 100% of graduates placed into employment, and the average wage is $17.60 an hour, which for many of the folks we're working with is a significant improvement in their income. The key to this is partnership. We've working closely with several nonprofit partners, including Rhoni, who you'll hear from in a moment, and Vermont Works for Women, but also Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, Audubon Vermont, and we also work with a number of state agencies. Voc Rehab is really supporting the construction intensives and allowing us to roll these programs out across the state. So it's, we are excited by the opportunity. I think there's tremendous need to provide training and get people who are sidelined now into the workforce because we need them. And so I think this really is a challenging time, but it also has these silver linings and an opportunity to turn a moment of adversity into a real success and to really transition people into good jobs. So thank you for allowing us to talk, and I also would be happy to answer questions later in the program if there's any questions.
Wonderful. And we certainly want to make sure that there is opportunity for questions. And I think, Thomas, just hearing you talk about how successful these programs have been, it's just another example of where there's amazing Vermonters doing incredible work that a lot of people don't know about resource and don't know about the different programming you're putting in place. I am going to come back to you, so just be prepared. I'll come back to all the panelists, but really thinking about now and hopefully being able to articulate what are your needs, because we are in this moment where we have a lot of funding coming to the state. Hopefully there is a Build Back Better agenda passed in Washington so that when it comes to meeting our climate action goals, there's actually the funding to support the infrastructure, to support the workforce development. But what would that look like? I mean, what would we need as a state to really take a program like yours and expand it to other communities? But it's really incredible what you're doing, and thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rhoni, who works for Vermont Works for women to talk about how we ensure in building this workforce that we're doing it in an equitable way that brings in women, that brings in Vermonters of diverse backgrounds, so that we're meeting our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals in creating a really sustainable, exciting workforce for the state. So Rhoni, over to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, and I'm excited to be here and have a seat at the table. So for those who may not know, Vermont Works for Women really promotes economic justice by advancing gender equity and supporting women and youth at any and all stages of their career journeys, whatever those might look like. And at VWW, and as you all know, Vermont's women faced a very heavy burden of the pandemic and a really strong brunt with really high unemployment claims. 74% of women claimed unemployment in October, just this recently. And so there's a lot that needs to be done to really get our women back on their feet and back to economic stability across our state. And as we've also heard, we know that renewable energy and clean energy jobs is one of the third fastest growing job platforms here in Vermont. It has a median wage around $20 an hour, and that can do a lot to get women and families really back on a path towards economic security. But there's a long way to go before we get to that. Women still sit at only 3% of construction workers. Women still sit at only 4% of installers, maintenance, and repair workers. And even within our state apprenticeship program, women still only comprise 11% of those apprenticeship roles, and that really is dominantly in childcare fields, not in any of the apprenticeship programs that could really benefit the clean energy sector. So now is the time that Vermont Works for Women, as well as other community partners and others across the state, employers and state agencies included, it's really time to invest in intentional recruitment and retention of underserved and underrepresented potential that we have in our state. And this includes youth, women, justice involved, new Americans, and underemployed. The list goes on. But there is a lot of potential in our state, and there are a lot of really great training programs that we need to provide those supportive on-ramps to really make them more successful and really connect the potential that we have to the jobs that are here and growing across the state. So at Vermont Works for Women, we have a Trailblazers program. And this Trailblazers program is really intended to teach both the hard skills needed to be able to walk onto a job site and be able to be successful on day one, but they're also teaching those soft skills that are vital to being a really strong employee: confidence building, conflict resolution, time management, things that really employers say are some of the strongest attributes of their employees. And really those strong attributes are also what make us great community members. So having these training programs that really provide wraparound supports to not only prepare employees to be the best employees that they can be for employers, but to also prepare them to really help with whatever those challenges that might be. You know, there's a reason historically why women and underrepresented populations have not been in these fields. And so to really meet those goals and to get more underrepresented populations, we have to address the historical barriers that have always been there. And so as an organization and as a collaboration, as Tom had mentioned with Serve, Learn, and Earn, we're really trying to address those barriers before participants even step on the work site. How can we provide wraparound services? How can we help you meet those goals that you need? How can we help you get that one more, whether front loader training experience or a little bit more in hands-on construction? How can we help you get those skills or connect to training programs that we have in our state and that are incredibly well funded right now, so that way you can be more prepared to walk onto the job site and to really feel confident in what you're doing. And as an organization, we want you to be retained in those positions. So we want to continue to provide those ongoing supports even after being hired and after being on the job sites, to make sure that you're in a respectful work environment and that you're motivated by the work that you do and that you see the potential in your economic security ahead. And I do believe Vermont has a lot of opportunities in its future, and we have so much potential across the state that we can better resource and really put to work here to meet these needs.
Thank you, Rhoni. I will come back to you if someone doesn't bring it up in the Q&A, just to talk about what are some of the barriers, and then how do we begin addressing those, either through more training or through different changes, just to create more access to opportunity and more on-ramps for Vermonters to participate in a lot of the wonderful training programs that you have. But thank you for joining us. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Maureen Hebert, who serves as the Associate Dean of Industry Relations and Workforce Development for Vermont Technical College. And Maureen's going to talk about expanding affordable HVAC/R education to meet growing energy efficiency and renewable energy jobs in Vermont. Maureen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Gray. It's an honor to be here today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work that we've done over the past few years. Vermont Tech's mission really is to provide career-focused technical and professional education, which prepares students for immediate workplace success and continued learning. We value our role in supporting the Vermont economy and meeting the needs of industry and business by preparing highly qualified individuals in high-growth, high-wage occupations, as these are some of the key economic drivers for our state. And how we do this is we provide accessible, career-focused education that is hands-on applied learning. Obviously, through COVID, we've had to pivot a bit and have offered hybrid and online versions so that we can access a wider audience. We have 4 campuses across the state, but we also work really closely with the career and tech ed centers to offer courses at their locations, as well as 6 nursing sites across the state. We work with instructors who are experts in their field. We deliver customized training, as well as training that leads to industry recognized credentials, micro-credentials, licensure, degree programs. We also offer internship opportunities and are a testing site for many of these industry sectors. But what I really wanted to highlight is the learn to earn model. We've been really successful in offering an apprenticeship type or registered apprenticeship programs across the state. And this includes the plumbing and electrical program, the related instructions delivered by Vermont Tech. And we currently have almost 700 students statewide in that program, which does feature a component around heat pump and solar installer. And there are sections in those training programs that are related to green and renewable energy. So what's been exciting about that opportunity is students can go right into a program where their training is basically either paid for by their employer or by grant funding. This past year, we also offered the CARES Workforce Initiative program through the Vermont State Colleges, which allowed us to offer the HVAC training program. That program has several different layers. We have a technician entry program for people who are new to the field. We have a certified technician program, which is in a more advanced program. We have a controls building and automation systems program and a field simulation program, which it features a component around heat pumps. In addition to the apprenticeship programs that I've mentioned, we also offer LEED certification, Building Performance Institute training, safety, certified indoor air quality management, and degree programs. So all of these are stackable to a degree, but it's not an if or. People can enter at the apprenticeship level and then can decide to go on if they want to pursue a degree. So we have associate's and bachelor's degrees in architectural and building, engineering technology, electrical engineering, construction management, electromechanical engineering, renewable energy, civil and environmental energy. I know that was mentioned quite a bit about our infrastructure early on. And we have a general engineering technology program. What's been exciting about the work that we've been doing the past year or two is that we have a lot of partners. We've been working really closely through our Strengthening Working Families initiative with organizations like Working Bridges and CCV. It really takes a collaboration to be able to get people ready to take a program, participate in a program, and be successful in the program. It's been mentioned before, Rhoni was saying that we really need to provide wraparound services and career readiness preparation for students. The SWIFI program allowed us to do that via childcare subsidies, transportation options, as well as support to get students access to a laptop or internet access. So we hope to continue that type of program in the future. We have a partnership with Voc Rehab that we're going to be starting very soon, hopefully this summer. So we can add more apprenticeship type programs, including expanding the HVAC programs that I mentioned. We also work really closely with the Vermont Department of Labor. We have a broadband fiber installer program that's starting in March. And that program through VDOL is funded through the apprenticeship funding, but we also can refer students to Vermont Department of Labor for WIOA funding, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding. We work closely with VSAC, Vermont Student Assistant Corporation, on advancement grants, other opportunities like the Curtis Fund. We just finished the CARES Workforce Initiative, so that funding ended in the end of December. We were hoping to continue that for the next year, as well as some critical occupation funding, which HVAC was not included in that program. That was largely focused on healthcare, but we're hoping in the next year that will be added to that list. The critical occupations program served about 430 Vermonters, the SWIFT program about 600. What we were able to find that made this work successfully were the wraparound services. So we've distributed many laptops, many welding equipment units. I think what people really appreciated having the option to be able to access resources like wraparound services to make sure that they could attend classes, could be successful in that program. And we work with employers around the state. So as we all know, everybody's really hurting for skilled workforce. So what we also provide is incumbent worker training. We provide a pipeline to those employers with opportunities for them to meet our students so they can interview our students, on site, offer a position. So we work currently with over 200 employers around the state. So if someone's looking for a position, we can help them, and we can help them find a really good paying job that has benefits and options for them. So again, it's really partnerships, wraparound services, work readiness training, and a learn to earn model. Not everybody can jump right out of high school into a college career path. So this allows people to have an on-ramp and a stackable option to get there if that's their desire. If not, it's a really great career path for many individuals to go into the trades. And that's another concern, is there is a lot of bias about this type of work nationally. So we really want to promote that this is a really exciting career. It has a lot of options for our state workforce. It's definitely in need and it pays really well, but it is a really exciting career for our students. So just want to emphasize that. That's a kind of a marketing campaign that we would love to work on and emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that you sort of ended with the excitement around this opportunity. And I think one challenge that we're all probably grappling with is, how do we take the next generation, or anyone in Vermont who is passionate about climate action, passionate about mitigating the impact of climate change in our communities, and saying, these are the jobs that are going to be part of transitioning Vermont and bringing in the 21st century workforce that's really going to be leading on climate action and creating a lot of excitement, or bolstering the excitement, removing some of the stigmas that we may have, but really trying to bring Vermonters into this process that is going to involve all of us and a lot of on the ground, hands-on doing, working and partnership. I did want to invite everyone here. We've got a lot of wonderful attendees. I also just want to recognize that there's some amazing employers on the call today. There's vocational and technical center leads. There's representatives. Please feel welcome. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'm happy to call on you. Or if you prefer to put it in the chat, go ahead. But we really want to create some space to bring in some other voices. But maybe just to kick things off, all of you have talked in different ways a little bit about barriers to entry and also wraparound services. And I'm curious, kind of coming out of the pandemic, as we work to grow this workforce, and obviously there's the actual training that needs to happen, but what is it that we can do to remove the barriers to entry? And if we talk about some of the wraparound services, be it childcare or making sure that we have broadband access or the actual tools to learn, but are there other things that we should be focused on as state to really allow for full opportunity and full participation? So I don't know, maybe Chad, I'm going to come back to you, and then Thomas and Rhoni, and then Maureen, will end with you. And folks who are listening, please feel welcome to raise your hand or put questions in the chat, and happy to call on you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. Look, I think the world is still upside down right now, as I think everybody recognizes. And, we're going to be stuck with some implications from the pandemic, probably, I think, throughout this year, from a supply chain perspective, from a shipping and transportation perspective. But with respect to the human infrastructure, that we need, I'm incredibly grateful for the folks from organizations like VTC and Vermont Works for Women who are, and Tom's group over at Resource, trying to, educate and train the workforce that we need. So for barriers to entry, I mean, I would say, look, the more funding we could throw at these programs, obviously, the better. I also see, as I think you mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Governor, we have a once in a generation, maybe more than that, opportunity for federal funding to come into the state of Vermont. And we need to get as much of that funding as possible. And that's not just for the hard infrastructure work, but that is for these training and educational opportunities. Everybody's spot on. I mean, these are great jobs, solid hourly wage, salaried positions. I mean, really, a lot of this work is going to lift people either out of poverty or into a better economic position in society. And so I think whatever we can do in the current moment, which is, a decent amount of money coming into Vermont from Washington, D.C., we need to go get as much of that as possible. And we need to, fully fund any and all training programs that we have here in the state. We've certainly benefited from a lot of the work that's been done here from a training perspective, from an educational perspective. We see every time we put a job posting out, we get, dozens and dozens of applicants, because I think there is palpable excitement about being part of the climate economy. So we just need to educate both young and old, I would say. Again, there are a lot of people that are going to need to make the transition as well, and that may be, further along in their careers than just coming out of high school or coming out of college. So funding.
I think we got our deliverable on that one. Thank you. Thomas, what about you?
I'll jump in. I think it was my turn. One of the biggest needs I see is sort of long-term signaling, that we essentially communicate to employers, we communicate to manufacturers, we communicate to entrepreneurs that we're headed in a certain direction, and that it's not going to be funding for 1 year and then go away, and it's sort of going to be reliable and consistent, and that demand is going to be there. So I think that it's both the funding, as Chad's pointing out. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chad, and others who are also providing funding to nonprofits. We get some government funding, but we also really depend on charitable contributions. In fact, Resource, through, you can come shop at our stores, buy reuse, and you can support our job training program. So thank you for our customers out there as well as donors. But that signaling is really going to help all of us sort of stay focused on a long-term transition and change. And it's because we're not going to be able to do it overnight. It's going to take a lot of consistent effort. I was down driving my son to a ski race on Saturday, and I get down there, think, okay, I can make it in the electric car, but the electric charging station I pull into with 30 miles to go on my Chevy Bolt, is on the fritz. And so then I'm barely getting back to Rutland, where there's another high-speed charger at the Shearer, the Chevrolet dealer there. And so we need more infrastructure to make all of us comfortable buying electric cars, using them, taking them instead of the gasoline car down to a long distance, and relying on that there's going to be services there. So I think part of that signaling is imposing some laws, possibly taxes now, that don't take effect for 5-10 years. So essentially, we signal to people who are buying infrastructure now that, in 5 or 10 years, you're going to be paying a higher cost to buy to buy gasoline, or in fact, this gasoline is not even going to be available. We need to sort of, I think, provide some carrots and sticks to help all of us transition faster, because we don't have much time. And a lot of this infrastructure is going to last for so long. People buying homes right now need to know that they don't just need to insulate so that they're warm, but they want to insulate in a way that is going to make us solve the problem 20 years from now, when we really can't be continuing to burn fossil fuels to heat our homes. And when it's so possible through technology and insulation not to. So I think the technology is there. How do we get adaptation? And then how do we get workforce to meet the adaptation and move it forward? So I think long-term signaling is one of the biggest needs I see.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think it's important in this moment where we're thinking about American Rescue Plan Act funds. Rescue Act sounds like it's immediate. Sounds like, and there's some things that are immediate that we really need to invest in, be it some of the human infrastructure to support a workforce, right? Climate change, or childcare, for example, or access to housing, or even paid family and medical leave, or access to immediate training programs. But I know that we need to think far beyond that. And what is the long-term plan to build a workforce to really meet the needs that we have now, to make sure that all Vermonters know that you're living in a house from the 1800s or 1700s, or if you're driving a vehicle that ultimately may need to come off the road, that we have a pathway and plan for making that possible. And that it's going to be a long-term process. So I appreciate the signaling, and I think it's important to figure out what does that look like, and how do we weave that into our strategy, especially as we come out of this pandemic and realize that climate change is still happening. It's still been happening throughout the pandemic. And then we need to have a really, really quick plan to move at a faster pace. Rhoni, what about you? We talked about barriers to entry, wraparound services. You brought that up a lot. What can we do to remove barriers to entry and increase support for wraparound services? And what are those? Do you mind
absolutely
explaining further?
Yeah, well, and when I think about, our organization, we serve youth all the way up to women at any stage. And really, there's a lot of connection between the barriers. And we really see it as stigma and stereotypes and underrepresentation of women in these fields, or understanding what the potential could be in entering these fields. Stigmas around entering career tech ed, stigmas around going into manual labor, stigma around even the ability to do it. And that's both sides, from the youth, the woman, the participant, but also from potentially the employers and community members saying, well, women just may not be interested in weatherization. Well, how do we know? And have we presented the opportunities and what those pathways could be? And have we really done the due diligence to make those pathways, more navigable? Have we put in the supports that's needed? Vermont also faces some very rural communities. If we have a single mom installing a solar panel, she's 45 minutes away from her school, can she get there in time to be able to pick up their child? And given what we're living in a pandemic, I know my aftercare program is shut down this week. So that directly impacts how much we're able to, one, not only build a workforce, but support the workforce so they're retained even through the ups and downs that we know are inevitable, whether it's through a typical Vermont winter or through a pandemic Vermont winter. We need to be able to build in those supports from an employer and from an infrastructure to really make sure that all of the diverse barriers are trying to be met, and that employers are supported in meeting those. And that's also one way as an organization. Yes, we're trying to train participants to be ready, but we also want to support employers who maybe need to adjust policies and practices or recruitment strategies, or build in specific supports for single moms or single parents or women who maybe need that additional support, and not turn it into a stereotype or a stigma to provide that support, but just make it an intention to really build that workforce.
That's terrific. And I know that there's some pretty incredible employers here. I see SunCommon. I know there's solar companies, for example, that are providing paid family and medical leave, doing so, without the request of the state. And that's really remarkable. I think we should be really proud of companies that are taking those steps. I do just want to say, if you have a question, feel free to raise your virtual hand or come off come onto the screen, and I'm happy to call on you. Maureen, I did want to come to you again on just around these questions of like, how do we remove barriers, and what are some of the wraparound services that we can provide to allow for more participation as we move forward?
So a couple of things. We serve about 3,200 Vermonters annually across the state. And after, really kind of talking with them, surveying them, the biggest issues are cost to getting that training and time to be able to participate. So we've been trying to remove those barriers by making the programs either free or really reduced costs, or having employers help offset those costs for participation. But the time is always a challenge. So making as many hybrid opportunities, so they're still getting a hands-on opportunity, but being able to take the course from home, at least partially. So if they have childcare issues or traveling issues, that's alleviated. High-speed internet came up quite a bit. Obviously, that's an equity issue. Just in seeing that in my own son's school over the past 2 years, it's been a huge challenge for many, many families. So I know we're trying to alleviate that issue, but that is still a concern. Career exploration. So Rhoni mentioned pathway articulation. I think there's a lot of opportunities to really explain why these careers are important and an option, and what the choices are for someone's trajectory if they're deciding to move into a particular industry, and having opportunities to explore that. So Vermont Tech has, over the summer, offered programs for high school and middle school students and adult learners to be able to explore new careers, but we want to be able to expand that. We work with the Career and Tech Ed Teacher Licensure Program, so working with those teachers I think is really key. Offering opportunities so they can talk about these careers in their classrooms, share work-based learning opportunities with those students and with adult learners at the CTEs. We do work with Job Corps as well, so that's another pathway for us, bringing in students from out of state, working with new Americans. I think there's a real opportunity there, and I'm going to put in the chat one of the resources that we use, which is the IREC Green Buildings Pathways. So I'm just going to put that in there for you. But that's some of my observations.
That's great. It sounds like there's we know there's a lot of areas for investment. One thing that I haven't heard the panel bring up, and just curious what your thoughts are. And again, if folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. We do offer for different professions tuition reimbursement, or basically it's scholarships, if you agree to go into a particular field. I don't think we've offered that for fields that are specific to helping with our climate action plan or climate mitigation. Of course, if you become an electrician or a carpenter, we have a lot of housing that we need to be built as well. And there's a lot of opportunities to have a workforce that are meeting multiple goals for the state. But curious what your thoughts are on having tuition reimbursement or having scholarships, or if you agree to move to Vermont and help us with our climate action plan and go into these career fields and stay for 5 years, that we support part of your relocation or et cetera, like really building a recruitment plan around these jobs that we need filled to really meet some of our bigger goals. So just curious if you have any thoughts on that. And I know that we have legislators here who's probably thinking about some similar ideas and questions, but just wanted to offer that up for anyone who wants to answer.
The McClure Foundation offered this past 2 years, actually, a grant program for the plumbing and electrical program to offset students' first year costs and to recruit new students into the program. Until they're hired by an employer, they have to pay out of pocket. So that was really important in recruiting two of the biggest first year classes that we've had with that program. And as I think I mentioned before, the critical occupations funding that we got this past year for nursing and childcare, we'd love to be able to expand that to other areas like the trades, to be able to offer more opportunities for students, because it is a critical infrastructure need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can just share that. I love that idea. It goes along the signaling that Tom was mentioning previously, and I think there are models for this. It's not my area of expertise, but I think about sort of family practice physicians who go into practice in a rural environment and have some tuition forgiveness or something. But yeah, that would seem to be a tremendous, I know we've been talking carrots and sticks, and wow, what a tremendous carrot that could be for our state. So yeah, full support there.
Good. There is a question that just came in regarding supports for new Americans, former refugees moving to Vermont. What is it that I guess some of your organizations may be doing to support cultural and linguistic education or access so that we have full equitable participation, be it from Afghan refugees or new Vermonters moving to the state?
I'll take a turn answering that. Resource, I guess it was 2 years ago, ran one of our Construction 101 classes that was for new Americans. And so because it was focused on new Americans, we were able to offer translation services during the course. Our experience from that was, and so the entire course, I think we had 17 students. So it was actually a very large course and had 3 linguistic groups. I think our experience from that was that we needed to get the language skills up to at least a minimal level before we really get into the technical skills. I mean, I think overall it was a successful program, but the learners who were new to English and really had very limited English skills struggled, and they were harder to place in employment. I think we ended up doing some placement, but it happened actually after some continued English proficiency. So we were partnering with Vermont Adult Learning, who was doing a lot of the language supports and training. And it's absolutely a need. We haven't gone back to the model of an intensive all refugee training program. I think in part because we've recognized that it's probably best to do some of the language skills first. And then actually part of what the immersion, once someone's language skills are up to a certain point, part of the training is developing those language skills in an intensive way for those participants.
That's terrific. That's incredible that you're offering that and that that transition and support is available. Rhoni, I'm curious if that's something that you're also tackling. And again, this question, it really gets at as a state that's trying to create more opportunities, trying to welcome new refugees, trying to be really welcoming and inclusive. How are we making sure that we have the support systems in place to create a landing pad that is inclusive for us, for employers, for housing, for education, transportation, all the different pieces that are necessary to make new Vermonters really thrive in our communities?
Absolutely. A lot of what we do within Vermont Works for Women is specifically around one-on-one employment coaching, because the needs can be very vast and different just depending on, are you ready to get into employment, or are there some skills that we need to improve on? We always will utilize translators if needed and interpreters where we can, and ensure that we're really making sure that these one-on-one coaching sessions are really intentional to get out what's needed. And also just working with other local organizations across the state that are really at the forefront of welcoming families and really making sure that families are for finding economic security here, and just being a support, saying we are here to provide this service. This is the capacity to which we want to help and be of service. Here's some different lanes and avenues that we want to work with some of your participants to, hopefully better resource and collaborate on this, and just provide some basic education on here are some career fields and pathways or resources that we can specifically help to, or give you that warm handoff to, one, to help support those families coming in, but also to help support the organizations to work together so that we're really providing this great welcoming community. And to Tom's point, the needs are very different, and each family is coming at seeking financial independence or economic security in a very different way. And so it's really trying to match what are those family or individual needs to what are the skills that are really needed to get there, and then how can we help make that possible. in a way that makes the most sense. So it looks very different, but I think how we see it is really that individual relationship and trying to really address those barriers as they come up is one of the strongest success stories we see.
Terrific. We are about 5 minutes away from wrapping up this inaugural seat at the table for this session. And I really wanted to give all of our presenters, all of you, an opportunity to really sort of drive home what it is you see as the most important step, be it for the legislature, for the state more generally, for my office, you name it, in terms of seizing this moment where we do have a lot of funding coming to the state, where we do have a climate action plan, a really terrific start at a plan that's going to continue to evolve and develop, in a moment to kind of write a new chapter in developing a workforce. And we know that we have pretty profound workforce needs, but I think it's also an exciting opportunity to say, this is where we want to go. These are the needs we have, and then how do we really build the workforce to meet those needs? So if there were concrete action steps that you'd like to see, I think Chad's going to probably say funding, but if there's other things, I'd love to kind of leave our audience with that and conclude with that today. So I don't know, I think we'll go in reverse order. Maureen, we're going to start with you. Have at it.
Yeah, I think as a state, really articulating how important this is and how students, participants, individuals can enter this field and work in many different industry sectors to help mitigate climate change. And I think articulating what the options are for these participants. I know we do it in our own little space, but as a community, as partners, being able to articulate that should have a really big impact and go a long way to recruiting more people into this field.
Thank you. Rhoni?
Yes, I'm going to very much piggyback on what Maureen said, but I think this is a time for ingenuity in collaboration with state agency, with our education systems, with employers, community partners, really stronger collaboration. I don't believe we need to reinvent new programs or recreate something new. I think we just need to better coordinate what exists and really get the potential that is in our state, or even those that want to come to our state, really connected.
That's terrific. Thomas?
Boy, you gotta remember that mute button, don't you? I saw Beth Sachs in the chat put in, the importance of mandates. And I think that, sort of essentially putting in some rules and phase outs and say, look, you're going to have to meet certain building codes. You have to insulate your building up to this level. All buildings should have solar or, have a net zero. I mean, it seems like the possibility just of, none of us really want to see a wind turbine on a mountaintop necessarily. I mean, I actually find them beautiful, but the solar on a roof is already developed space, and it just is, it's such a no-brainer in my mind. So I think that some mandates, because none of us buy houses very often, or most of us don't, I guess. But so I think putting in place some things that are just standard for some of these larger purchases, so that your average consumer doesn't have to figure them out. They can rely on whatever they're buying meets a certain minimal standard of efficiency, that it can be reused, that it's recyclable, depending on what you're doing. I think some mandates to require a high level of performance out of the products we're buying is important, because we as individual consumers don't have the time to figure this stuff out. So I do think that sort of long-term support so that consumers can make good decisions. But we don't have to spend 4 hours reviewing something before we make that purchase. So
yeah. There is and you bring up a really important point, and we probably could have an entirely separate seat at the table on consumer protection, and how are we making sure that Vermonters, as all of us, as we all participate in this process, where we do have mandates, that it doesn't have to be, well, one, that we're informed, two, we know where what we're buying or what we're doing fits into a bigger strategy, but three, that this transition that we're going to make, we are making, is one that we can all participate in a way that's pretty equitable. And I think that's where this conversation around the workforce is really important, but around tax credits, around just creating equal opportunity and really helping us meet these goals. So I hear you, and I'm glad that you brought up the mandate question, which I think is really important. I did see a lot of comments in the chat about the carrots and the sticks and how they can work together to help Vermonters engage. Chad, over to you. We're a little over time, but we're going to get
all right. So yeah, let's say funding, but also to not pick up on another thread that's been brought up here is positive market signaling coming out of the legislature, right? Like we've got the Global Warming Solutions Act. That was a great first step, but we need to continue to build the case that the renewable energy future is here now. We need to get ahead of our decarbonization efforts for transportation and building thermal and industry and everything else. We need to supply all that new load with clean renewables, and we need to make sure a lot of that comes in state, right? If this is all going to be offshore wind, Vermont's not going to benefit from the energy security and the job creation that we need. So it's really got to be focused on what we can control here within our own borders. And we need to look at this from a position of economic development, job creation, and prosperity, not one of fear and, oh my goodness, these renewables, are they really ready for prime time? They are. And now we need the legislature to back us up on that and really create those market signals that allow, that create the demand for these jobs that we need to create that we need the funding to really train the workforce of tomorrow today.
I love it. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Rhoni. Thank you, Maureen. I just want to thank everyone else for joining us today. I think this is a really, really important conversation. It's an exciting conversation, right? It's about turning this challenge into a terrific opportunity for Vermont. We'll continue to focus on this. I will certainly, as Lieutenant Governor. Please, if you think that there are people who didn't hear this conversation who should hear it, feel free to take the YouTube recording, which we'll have up shortly. Share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, stay in touch. We really want to work. I want to, but I know that the legislature, I'm sure that the executive branch does as well, wants to be part of getting this right, given this historic moment. So let's work together to transform our future. And thank you for being part of today's first seat at the table. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.